my baldness won't look quite on the
Laser
set.
beam.
I can't even see Danny.
I do need this. Okay, we're on. Welcome to Oh Say Can You See? I'm Mark Zapotowski. The show is brought to you by the CTV Society, and which originally was and is still to this day also officially known, well, I said the Society for Economic Equality, but we call it CTV. And tonight we have Lou Palus, who's running for state senate in the state legislature of Michigan for the 29th district, which encompasses perhaps most of Grand Rapids. And he's running with the Working Class Party. And with me tonight, and Lou is a member of CTV, for full disclosure. And he's joined by our longtime member, sometimes panelist, often crew person, Gerard Ackerheis, who's also here, supports Lou, I believe. And we're ready to, hopefully telephone calls will work. And this is a live show. This is the 17th of October. And maybe I should give you a chance to give your basic pitch as to why people should consider voting for you for their state senator here in Grand Rapids.
Well, the Working Class Party represents the working class. And the other two regular or the Republicans and the Democrats, they don't really represent us. So the reason why I'm running is, there's several reasons. One is to get West Michigan familiar with the Working Class Party and to make them understand that we are a class, and to get them more aware that they have a voice, that they can express themselves without fear of losing their jobs, without fear of reprisal of the more ruling class or the ones who are in charge.
In this sense, to whose advantage would it be to consider themselves the working class and to see an advantage in the Working Class Party? Who would be your voter? Who are the working class?
Pretty much the poor and the ones who work under a boss or under a capitalist, or not capitalist system, but well, capitalist system of course, but a corporate environment, which most people who work in a corporate environment are the working class.
Yeah. Okay. So some people who perhaps make a fairly good living but aren't the poor, but work under a boss and whose future is perhaps uncertain in these times, they might consider voting for you as well, perhaps?
Yeah. Well, the middle class, they're not really our target. It's mostly the poor and the working class, like those who work at McDonald's, those who work, well, all the franchises, and those who, like for example, I work for Holland Home, and I don't make a lot of money. I make, I can live if I don't have a car, and we're the working poor.
At one time perhaps that would have been a minority in the United States, but it seems to me the things that have happened for 40 years or more in the United States have led to a point where really perhaps most voters are poor now. That would be my little throw into what has perhaps changed. Gerard, do you have some opening questions for our candidate?
You said most voters are poor, but I think the voting population is only 30% of the entire population. You're saying
of the voting population.
Most of those people are poor.
If we're going into the actual population as a whole, I would say even more people are poor because there's a very large percentage, a growing percentage of the population who are children, the very young. And actually, in Michigan, at least, if not throughout the country, most children are growing up in poverty now, which is a big shift. Big shift. And it tells you that perhaps, that is the majority future of the United States in the not too distant future, is a majority poor population. Maybe that's why people know that, and maybe that's why Bernie Sanders did so well and came. If it weren't for corruption on the part of the Democratic Party, I think would have been the candidate to run up against Trump myself.
Well, I would like to comment that even a lot of the Trump voters, the Trump supporters, are working class, supposedly.
That's why Bernie would have won against Trump. Bernie would have had issues. Trump just lets people know that he shares their resentments and their prejudices, and that's the deeper truth that they connect with. They connect with his hatred and his prejudices, and that's what they mean when they say, oh, we know he lies, but he tells a deeper truth. Which is scary. Yeah, Trump. But Bernie would have been dealing with truths, rather than, bringing up the worst in people. I think he would have been the uniter, not the divider.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess.
What do you think, candidate, on that
Well,
issue?
I think that we have to teach the working class, or try to present them as a class. They don't really associate themselves as a class. They associate with their religion or with their ethnic group, or with whatever the particular class or whatever the group they associate with. They don't associate themselves as an entire class. They don't quite understand that, I think. And one of the reasons why the working class party would bring them all together and associate them as a whole political and economic class.
Yeah, I think, yeah, and the American world, the world here in Michigan, is definitely. Oh, you're not coming through on your mic. It's definitely still dealing with a situation where I think they know that there's a class situation. They're always talking about these elites, the Trumpites, talk about the elites and the deep state and this kind of thing. And Bernie was talking about issues of class, at least, enough that he even called himself a socialist, which is, remarkable. And that didn't really hurt him in the polls with the Democratic voters. I still think he would have won. But Trump does the same thing, but it only goes so far, and obviously he's an elite. But he's somehow stirring up, the hatred and divisions over, these snobbish corporate elites of old money that rule everything and, are keeping down the middle class.
And the working class.
And the working class.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well, they
So-
want to keep us down.
I mean, I'm just saying, for the sake of, what's being focused on here, that the increasing poverty in the United States is clearly a major issue, and people should be identifying with their class. And you even can see, as awful as it is, the whole Trump thing as a reflection of, the desperation in the working
Well, I don't
class.
know how Trump could possibly represent the working class when he's filthy rich. I mean, he doesn't have a clue to what we go through.
He does it by saying,
None
oh,
of
it's the
them do.
elites are causing your economic problems. It's the elites who
Well,
get rich.
he is the elite.
Well, yeah.
But he
But
has this
he's an
top-
elite who says, look at these people over here. They're the elite. They're the ones who are keeping you all down. I'm your friend. I will,
Well, if he's our friend.
Well,
Who needs enemies?
He's convinced us that he's his friend by being a populist, and it's not true. It's all an artificial contriving, really
Well,
a show of.
He benefits from a kind of populism, but it's that fascist kind of populism. not all populism is equal, and I mean that's a particular type of populism. I don't think populism is a bad word per se. You know, even though he had kind of reactionary religious views in a way, William Jennings Bryan in the 1890s and the early 1900s had a kind of populism where he was trying to rescue people from, you know, the predatory banking structure and the manipulation of gold and, you know, currency to cause ups and downs in the economy that were driving, you know, middle class farmers and out of business, you know, by manipulating their debt.
There's been a lot of populist parties and characters. For instance, have you heard of the Farmers Party?
I never heard of them.
No, but William Jennings Bryan was, you know, essentially the Farmers Party in 1900.
Yeah, and then also part of the appeal.
But there is a Farmers Party, you're saying?
Yeah, there was, I think, at about the same time.
Okay, the same thing we're talking about.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, 1890s, early 1900s.
And that's also when the industrial workers of the world developed, started, and the working class party kind of evolved out of this ideology of a one big union for everyone. And I was reading about this.
So it evolved out of it, but is it actually officially related to the IWW?
The IWW is nonpartisan.
No, they don't get involved
But
in politics.
one of the influences of the working class party when they developed it, this is a relatively new party. It's only been around since 2014 or so. But they were influenced by Eugene Debs, which was one of the founders, one of the main characters of the IWW when they were founded 100 years ago.
He ran as a socialist for the United States Congress several times.
And then people are saying that it's...
For president even, yeah.
The Wikipedia, there's a really short Wikipedia article about the Working Class Party, and it's referenced as a Trotskyist, so there's some roots in Trotskyism.
Do you think that's a fair statement, that it's Trotskyist,
It's
or do you
not
think
pure,
that's sort of
no.
inflammatory, meant to be?
I don't know who wrote this. A wiki can be written by anyone, and it sits up there until someone disputes it, right?
Well, do you think that you're Trotskyist? Trotskyist probably means that there should be... Trotsky believed... Well, Trotsky was one of the founding members of the Bolshevik revolution that established the Soviet Union. And he controversially within the Soviet Union thought that the Soviet Union would never be safe, a workers' revolution would never be safe unless there was worker revolution throughout the world that brought about people, you know, communist states throughout the world. Do you think that it's fair to call the working class party Trotskyist in that sense, or do you think it's simply meant as something to scare people?
No, it has, the ideology has some roots in that, but it's also is a political party. That's the main goal, is to get votes and put out candidates like Lou. But there's always more work to be done. The whole revolutionary thing this is just one means to that end.
Well, Lou, what would this, what practically would you hope to achieve, you know, in your wildest dreams or in your more practical dreams if you were to be elected to the state senate? What would you be attempting to do for the people of Michigan and the people who had voted you in?
Well, first of all, I'm not a Trotskyist.
Okay, that's...
I mean, let's get that clear. And
all right, I think it was meant to be inflammatory, and whoever wrote it, because it's like one of the, you know, that's the most radical and bizarre, you know, of the armed revolutionaries to be a Trotskyist.
I mean, if there might be Trotskyists in the party, but so what?
Okay, but you're not a Trotskyist.
I'm not a Trotskyist.
You're not planning
I don't have
spreading your revolution throughout the world necessarily.
I'm not a Leninist,
Okay.
I'm not a Stalinist, I'm not like any of that. I'm for
So-
what works.
We'll talk about your platform.
Okay,
and,
yeah, your
and
platform.
What,
What
your
would
goals
you
are
like to see
for the party? What
if
are
you
the
were
party's
to get
goals
in there?
and-
What would you
Well, I
work with
want to-
other legislators to accomplish?
We have to have at least better paying jobs. I mean,
That's something, yeah.
I mean, the jobs out there now are pay nothing. If a young man or a young woman, they enter the workforce, if they're lucky, they can get a $10 hour job, if they're lucky. And then you have to factor in they have to pay taxes, they have to pay health care, they have to pay state taxes, federal taxes, and what they come back with, hardly nothing. And with that, they have to get, of course, all the corporations and all the jobs that are offered, they want reliable transportation. Sometimes they want you to buy your own uniform with that 10-hour job. And then you have to put a roof over your head, you have to put food on the table, and if you have kids, that's even worse. So we're not going anywhere unless we get decent jobs that pay a decent wage. And I want at least $15 an hour start, not this $10 hour. What are you gonna do
Yeah,
with $10?
right. $15 an hour.
I
At least.
I would really, at least
Yeah.
20.
I mean,
That's a start.
the thing is, and I think at this point just about everyone realizes that the average standard of living for the average person in the United States has gone way down, over the past 40 years or so. The purchasing power has gone way down. The cost of housing has gone way up. I mean, everything has inflated over the years, and people have taken more and more profits at the expense of people who can barely afford, to keep up with this situation. So yeah, I mean, okay, so that would be one thing, increase wages because they've been stagnant, haven't risen for so long in reality, in real terms. So that to start, is there anything else that you would think of right off?
Let's see. Well,
That's a biggie, of course, but
Well, along with that would be more support of the unions, because unions are
we
the
have to have
people that
we have to change the laws and amend the state constitution to help workers collectively organize.
well, right now we're one of these right-to-work states.
Well, that's
Could you
got-
tell us what that
that's-
means?
Well, it's just you have the right not to join the union,
So
and then the unions still have to
represent you and
represent you, even though
negotiate.
You don't, and that's
and-
just that's ridiculous.
so it's a
It's a ploy
it's designed to destroy unions,
the unions,
to
yeah.
weaken them.
and
yeah.
get rid of that right to work state. That's
So that would be
that doesn't
would
help,
be one that
it
you
does
would be
not
looking
help
for.
the working
yeah.
class at all.
Yeah. Okay.
That's
Question
another one.
about what he would
um,
pursue as a platform, or what
we're
you
gonna
might
talk
know
about
since.
the environment and
Well, the Enbridge,
Enbridge. Oh,
was it 5?
well, letting corporations control our environment. The latest example of that in Michigan is the PFAS pollution epidemic that we're having. There's pockets of this newly discovered toxic,
Mhm.
cancer-causing pollution around. There's an air base of
Military bases with
Military
runways
bases and
used it as a
airports.
fire retardant, and they would go out and practice, and they would spray this stuff all over the runways.
and now there's Wolverine and Rockford.
Also, it was used as a
Water
water
repellent.
repellent for shoes. So yeah, we have that locally. So
And Enbridge wants to build a tunnel under the Straits of Mackinac. Already they have a oil pipeline that's being dented and could
has
fall
some
apart any
corrosion on
minute,
it too. Yeah.
and would be a huge environmental disaster if anything happened there.
So, is the party opposed to Enbridge transporting oil across the straits?
Well, we want to get rid of the Enbridge.
And opposed to the pipeline as
Yeah,
well?
completely
I mean, to
opposed. I mean,
the tunnel for the pipeline.
the Great Lakes is our greatest natural resource. We cannot gamble with the Great Lakes. Get rid of the pipeline.
And what about putting in a tunnel underneath the water so it doesn't get in the water?
I'd have to look at it and read more about it.
You'd have to look at the engineering more
Yeah.
closely to make sure it wouldn't get into the lakes.
I
Okay.
doubt very much that's possible.
I don't know. I think it's possible depending on what the rock is and the layers and things
Well,
under there.
maybe
but-
know more about it than I do, but.
Well, I've seen some documentaries
Okay.
on cable TV back when I had access to cable TV that told me something about the geology of Michigan, and there's some hard rock layers and very deep sand layers and things.
That's interesting.
But yeah, well, it's so. Any other questions that you can think of? Well, we're hoping to have the phones working. Perhaps around 7:30 we can give it a try. But we're talking to Lou, who's running for state senator here in Michigan to go to Lansing to represent Grand Rapids in the 29th state congressional district.
Yeah,
Um,
29th district. Well, how about Nestle taking water out of spring water?
That's gotta stop.
Yeah, because they're profiting from water that is for everyone. And I even heard, I don't know if it's a rumor, but they even want to start charging for air. Have you ever heard of that? You're gonna sell
Why
air.
not?
So, Lou, your place of employment is closing, and
No.
I wrote down that perhaps this had some influence on how you're perceiving politics these days. Is there anything you want to say about that? Because I met with Lou about a week ago, and we talked about some things that he might think were relevant. So your place is closing. Is that relevant to you running at all? How did that happen?
Yeah.
And was it fair?
Well, I've always been at the mercy of the employee class. And so when I was working for 15 years at this place called Farmers Insurance, because they had a corporate kitchen. And so they outsourced our department after 15 years of service. Well,
They privatized, I mean,
They
you were their employee, but then they contracted to someone who probably was, as a worker, way undercutting you, and then
Yeah, I lost
there
10
was an executive who pocketed even the difference. It was also making a profit off of it, and you were a bit more expensive, and they got rid of you.
well, it wasn't like I was, earning a vast sum of money. I mean, I had pretty decent benefits.
You had benefits, yeah.
Yeah, and that all went.
Yeah, you got sold into slavery, basically.
Pretty much.
Well, and this person that replaced you probably had no benefits, right?
Well, they didn't exactly replace me. I went into this
Well, they
company.
outsourced your job to
Yeah,
another
but
corporation that hired somebody who
They
probably
hired me.
Oh, they
They
whoa.
hired
You
me.
got hired back in
I got hired back
by
in.
another company.
Suddenly, you didn't have. You were working at the same place,
Yeah.
doing the same thing, but suddenly you weren't their employee, and
I
you
was-
lost your benefits.
I was Compass employee now. Then after that, 'cause
Did you
Compass-
have benefits with this other group?
Yeah, they weren't as good as.
Not as good. And over time,
Well, over time they started cutting my hours because they wanted me gone because I was there for so long that I had at least 3 weeks of vacation. Well, they didn't want me to have all that vacation, so they treated me like, pretty bad.
at the
At the Compass
the
group,
outsourced
the
group.
outsourced group Compass.
They don't really want you to take your vacations and things.
No, they don't like that.
No, yeah, I've worked for corporations that wanted, I mean, on paper, they would tell you had this and you had that, great benefits, but then you had to buy into your benefits and spend, all sorts of money to get your supposed benefits, but you found this out later. And besides that, well, actually, you never believed it anyway. So, and if you even tried asking for your vacation time or your benefits, it would hurt you. Yeah.
Well, anyway, the general manager, she called a meeting, a mandatory meeting, and she called it that day. Usually they call it a day before, but it was a blizzard that day, and I was supposed to pick you up, I remember.
Yeah.
And she had this meeting, and I thought she was going to go over the menu. Well, she was telling us that she was going over our customer service. She was telling us that our customer service sucked. And this was like 3 years in when we're into Compass. And I thought, well, if our customer service was so bad, why didn't you mention that when you first came into the company? And she actually blamed us if they did not renew their contract. It was our fault that they wouldn't. And I pointed out to her, no, it's your fault. You're the manager. And as soon as she got done with her little spiel, she said, well, that's all I have for you. So I got up and was going to leave. And she goes, where are you going? I go, well, I have things to do. It's a blizzard. It's going to take me at least an hour and a half to get home. And she got really upset that I left.
She didn't give you permission.
She didn't give me permission to leave. But she said she was done. And that really ticked her off, and so she put me on part-time.
Did she make you stay, or did you just leave?
I just left.
Oh, okay.
It really pissed her off.
Yeah.
So, as a candidate, potentially as a state legislator, what do you think could be done legislatively? Anything to end this kind of situation, or begin to
As I
end
said
it?
before, you have to have a collective. You have to have unions come in. You're going to have to, and it's not going to be easy. It's going to be a really bad fight, because a lot of the people who are in the workforce are scared to death that they're going to lose their jobs. And you even mention unions, and they get a little nervous.
Mm-hmm.
And so if a person wants to go into a company, try to organize. You're bringing hostility to already a hostile workforce. And you're just going to get a lot of good people fired.
Including yourself, probably.
Including yourself.
Is actually illegal if you're organizing to be fired because of that. And now they'll come up with excuses of why you're getting fired, but it's not because you're organizing. But
Because you got up when there was a blizzard and left because someone said they were
yeah,
done,
they'll
but
come
they
up
didn't.
with something.
They weren't done.
You didn't salute as you left
I
or
didn't,
something.
yeah, I love to salute her. She wouldn't have loved it. Well, anyway, I was looking for another job, and that's how I got I got hired in Fulton Manor, part-time at first, but yet the ironic thing is they were still part of the same company as Compass. Holland Home, the managers.
So you worked there, but you didn't. You still worked for your same company, but at a different location.
Yeah, well,
Sort of
but
like a
I was
transfer.
working for Holland Home, not Compass. But the
Oh.
managers were part of Compass.
Oh my gosh.
Isn't that bizarre?
Twisted. It's hard to
So
keep track of.
Holland
but yeah.
Home hired me, but my bosses and the management was all part of
So they
Compass.
outsourced the management
Yeah.
and the administration.
Yeah.
Well, there's more and more of that. I mean, my earlier talk about what exactly is the working class, I think I was saying that because to me it's flexible, and more people are in that situation. We have, even among people that we consider to be perhaps relatively affluent, are on the precipice of seeing their incomes decline and their work situation become more and more precarious. And to many, it's happened. They've been outsourced. Their positions have been eliminated. Because of computerization or outsourcing to management that's actually in lower, middle management that's in India, perhaps, that's looking over things that are actually digital and might as well be done in India. And there's no way that people currently have see anything other than, the mass of people, even the more affluent, seeing their situation undercut. It's the logic of the situation. I think if you support something happening to people who are weaker than you could easily find out that, this lack of solidarity leads to your own position being undercut, even though you perhaps imagined that it never would happen to you. That's happened, I think, and is happening also. Hey, Lou, you mentioned that perhaps you wanted to talk about, the week ago, you mentioned that perhaps you wanted to talk about the new Jim Crow phenomenon. What do you think that is?
All the prisoners, when a person when they get out of prison, they paid their time. They did their time. They shouldn't be stigmatized by felonies. You did your time. You did your time.
Whoops. Is that your mic?
Yeah, and they can't vote. They have.
They can't vote.
They have all sorts of restrictions on their normal citizenship status in many ways.
I see.
Something that is certainly true in Michigan. Many people, especially many of our urban minority people, because of the lack of job opportunities and the fact that essentially the economy in Michigan and the country as a whole has not been growing for decades. Many minority people found themselves involved in underground economies, such as the drug economy or whatever, to large degrees, as a outlet for ambition and a way of making a living, and ended up in the prison system. So would that be, this of course is part of the puts people in that new Jim Crow situation.
Well, aren't prisons now ways to make profit?
Also, yeah. I mean,
that's
what would you say about the for-profit prison system and
horrible.
It's
how
kind
you
of
stand on it?
ironic, though, that they say that they're providing jobs, and the people that are working in the prisons are the working class, most of them.
Yeah.
So, that's one of their defenses.
That they're job creators?
Excuses of, that they're job creators. And
What a horrible way to
What,
make
the
create
state?
jobs.
Mhm.
But why privatize these? I mean, doesn't the state
Well, it's
itself
just
provide?
like Lou's situation.
Same thing, undercutting the wages, et cetera.
Yeah. And then they also put the prisoners to work, but they only make less than.
Slave labor.
Yeah, basically making license plates or sorting recycling or cleaning up trash along the highways.
Well, there was a movement for a while of organizing the prisoners.
There is,
I
there
know,
still is.
yeah.
And they've had strikes every year, a general strike for prisoners, and the IWW has a campaign on the incarcerated workers.
I saw Cole.
Organizing committee
Mhm.
is part of that. To get the prisoners to organize themselves, it's really challenging
Mhm.
to get that. And like, you think it's hard for us to organize out here in the public. Think
Yeah,
of
because
doing
just
that
because
when
they're
you're-
prisoners doesn't mean that they should be represented.
Mhm.
We all deserve representation.
Supposedly with the Constitution, right?
Well,
Yeah.
The way I look at it, to advocate for my own political viewpoint, since so many people have been caught up in prisons, and so many people come from a particular economic class and particular ethnic groups, it really looks like a vast social injustice. Certainly if there had been jobs and a real economy, a growing economy for our people, this would not have ended up being something that would have swallowed all these people up in the first place. So taking away a person's rights to vote and participate, in society compounds the injustice and the problem from my own perspective.
And also when you actually are released from jail or prison, it's also a huge task just to get back on your feet again, and there's so much stigma and barriers to any resources.
So many people end up committing crime again because
Yeah.
it looks like the only hope. And it was the only hope originally, which is the thing.
Well, they
Prison
want-
didn't do anything for
They
them.
want to repeat prisoners to repeat again because that's how they make their profit.
Well, that's how they keep a pool of desperation in society, by having not only the unemployed, by which they mean the people who collect unemployment, but the people who never get employed or are employed so little that they don't even count as the unemployed. And that's a very large group of people in our society.
I can imagine how they could even get a job.
The underworking class.
I mean, when you apply for a job, then you have to. They want you to have a drug screen. They want a background check. They want you. The working class have to leap over all these hurdles just to get maybe a higher than minimum wage job.
A lot of times you have to have transportation.
And transportation.
Cars are more and more expensive. Gas prices go up. Then there's rent and food. Like downtown Grand Rapids, you can't afford to live downtown anymore on a minimum wage job.
No.
No, they've closed down those high-rise units that did exist downtown for decades.
And if you don't live downtown, you have to have a car to get around. There's no other options. Bicycling
Well-
is dangerous. The bus maybe runs every hour, and not on weekends.
Well, one has to ask yourself, why was this all created?
What?
Why-
Society or
well-
this whole system of
the system,
downward trends?
the downward trends, the system, the way the ruling class are strangling us. Why would they do this to us?
Do you have a theory?
Well, I was
I have one,
thinking
but we could all share our theories,
it's
I suppose.
happening, like you were saying, at least 40 years, which was half of our lives here in this room. Ever since Ronald Reagan, perhaps, or before that, Richard Nixon.
Oh, the trickle down effect.
Yeah, this.
We're waiting for our
We've
trickle.
watched our economy and our politics, everything degrade throughout our whole lives, except for the beginning, maybe in the early 60s. But then everything started to disintegrate along with Watergate and the Vietnam War, and then along with Ronald Reagan. Jimmy Carter kind of helped a little, but then Bill Clinton, and who was actually very moderate, could even call him somewhat of a Republican in a way, and then Ronald Reagan, I mentioned that, and then the Bushes, and now look what we have. And
The great orange one.
turn it back around
Or the
again.
great orang one, that guy.
But
My theory is that, well, it's about profit, yes, because ever greater profit could go to ever fewer people. So that was like, there was a cult of pure capitalism that came in since, it's been there all along, but since Goldwater, and then especially since Ronald Reagan, the Republicans wanted to go more and more radically into this anti-poor, anti-social welfare state, fundamentalist capitalism, concentration of power in the hands of the very wealthy, although they pretended that, it would also float the boats of, small entrepreneurs as well, and maybe everybody, but that didn't happen. That didn't happen at all. Power became concentrated in fewer and fewer hands. But that's because my deeper theory into this is that they saw a very affluent society that looked like it could continue to become more and more advanced, more and more affluent. It was a magnificent market within itself. Most successful society, perhaps, for more people than any society that we know of, historically. And they said, but this is dangerous because there's too much democracy, there's too much turmoil. They see the people behind the screen, and they even want that power of the lever pullers, who should remain unseen. And so they said, well, we need to lower their wages, lower their expectations, lower their education level, perhaps even mess with their constitutional form of government and make it inoperative, because they're a danger to the elite class.
And
Ultimately,
manipulate
the
their
U.S. was a
media.
danger to the power structure. And so everything we've seen has been the destruction of our society by the elites of our society, who are afraid of the mass of our society. And so they've been undercutting the health of society, because the society was too healthy and might take power away from them as the elites. This is my analysis.
Very well put.
Yeah, that's
Does that sound like something that could be agreed with?
Of
yeah,
course,
yeah.
Well, what should be done about it as a candidate? Who would you be trying to convince and work with to see if we could do something practical? What might that look like? I know it's a tall order as a question, but maybe you could give it a shot.
Well,
If you can remember the question.
yeah.
If that's what's
I-
happening, how could we turn that around in Michigan?
Well, we're going to have to,
Just,
because we're being strangled to death
yeah, well.
by the wealthy,
I would agree, yeah.
and I really, to be honest, I don't have the answer. To be honest, I don't know how we're going to do that. What do you think, Gerard?
Yeah, what do you think?
Well, just doing what you're doing is just one little step. Growing a party, introducing bills in the Senate. Do they get introduced in the Senate or no?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I mean, some bills do,
Some
sure.
do, okay.
Money bills, I think, probably have to originate in the representative state, not the state Senate, but the state House of Representatives, probably, if it reflects the U.S. Constitution.
So that would be your job, like Mr. Smith goes to Washington.
You would be debating budgets, but
debating.
proposals would come up from the lower house,
and
meaning
be on committees, and you
state
would
representative.
you would grow your base. You would provide an example of what needs to be done, and then more people will come on board, and then you'll get more votes, and you'll head off to Washington eventually.
Well, that would be great. We could turn you into our senator, we could perhaps, or maybe, we could go, at least maybe we could replace Justin Amash with Lou Palus, perhaps. I would say yes. Just being there and talking about the issues and doing even small things, if they can be done, is building an awareness and a possible, political base for doing something more significant in the future. So that's something all by itself. I mean, there doesn't have to be a full-blown, remedy for everything,
Usually
from the very beginning.
it's a gradual change. It takes lifetimes to do some kind of social change like that, but you never know.
It's been a lifetime as we've seen,
Right.
the U.S. deteriorate. And people have not believed it, and they've always thought the best of the people who were doing the worst.
Yeah, but
we've seen it all our lives.
There's always examples of that happening.
Oh, I think it's
I
what
mean-
it is to be a human and have a human society. These are always going to be the forces that will emerge and that have to be watched for and have to be reacted against. I think the problem is American society has gone so long without an effective reaction against this obvious, essentially evil trend in our society of people being allowed to exploit other people and claiming that it's for their own good.
Well, what I was trying to say is sometimes the change can be dramatic and sudden, like the fall of the Soviet Union, the end of the Cold War. Like they're talking about this blue wave coming through in a few weeks or in 2020. You never know. Things can change really suddenly.
Speaking of which,
Don't you
well,
think of
I
other
think
examples of that too.
well, things can change suddenly, and they could change far for the worse. But let's say that Trump's supposed leaks that he does not deny, that he made really are for real and not just Trump BS, where Trump says that he's going to declare martial law if they try to remove the rightful president. He'll have the traitors arrested and tried by, the army. Martial law will be declared, and that's what all that cell phone presidential emergency system was. That he's saying, look, I'm about to do this thing, lay off of, don't impeach me because I'm the people's, leader, and you'd better not do that. And so it could get far worse. Yeah. But that could mean, sometimes things get really bad, and that's just before, it forces things to a head, so to speak, and you get the possibility in that crisis, of a reaction that will finally deal with something as long-term as this decline of freedom and the ability to live a real life that we've seen in the United States for 40 years or more.
Well, I think we should talk about education.
Okay.
That's a major thing. Well, education is a right, it's not a privilege. And I think the working class people have been deprived of a decent education. I know I was deprived by going to a public school that was very low, on the totem pole. A friend of mine suggested that we stop paying property taxes and have the federal government do public schools, because being a property taxes, it just increases the elite, because every neighborhood is different. Some neighborhoods are rich and some neighborhoods are poor. Well, the ones who are rich get more of the finances than the poor ones. So that does create I think that's part of the problem, that we have the separation of, because Americans are Americans. They're all one people, whether you're rich or poor. We're a nation.
I think so. Yeah, of course. But for some people that's controversial. But continue.
But they're the rich and the poor they are coming more and more apart. Well, something's going to give.
Yeah. I mean, for the health of society and to ensure that we don't have a more and more violent and conflict-ridden society, I think that would be a step in the right direction, Lou, to have a kind of equal funding, equal resources, more based educational system in the United States as a whole. That would be a solution. Yeah. Betsy DeVos would be against it.
Yeah, well,
she's rich.
Of course.
You heard of the dumbing down. They've really been anti-education and
Very much so.
I think
providing us with all this stupidity of entertainment and celebrities, and these are our role models, and I can't believe
like Brett Kavanaugh, he's a celebrity. He was
yeah, I'm thinking more of the Kardashians and or any of this crap you see on TV or on Facebook.
Yeah, the cultural, pop cultural sort of stew of very shallow cultural material.
And our president, for example, was a TV star.
Yeah, speaking of shallow cultural material, The Apprentice. You're fired.
Show, And that's what we're being raised on, instead of the classic literature and the classic education that we got.
People developing a real
or our parents,
intellect, people developing a real attention span. That's something that's not being promoted in our society by the educational system that many people get, and also the kind of device culture and entertainment culture that so many people are just enmeshed in. It's a serious issue. Yeah. So Lou, you probably have more that you would like to tell us about education and how you might deal with it other than funding, or is that basically basic theory?
I think they should take the schools away from the administrators and give it to the teachers who actually are, they should be ones who are running the school and not the administrators.
Mhm. I've
So
known-
school by school?
I've known a few teachers that were totally frustrated with their jobs and couldn't wait to retire because it is a brutal, grueling job, the way it is
Well,
in the public
And more, they
schools.
don't expect a teacher to have, the individual room to maneuver and experiment or present material. It's very controlled, and that's a big frustration
They
for a
already have to
teacher.
buy a lot of their own materials and
Oh yeah,
come up with their own lesson plans. So yeah, I would agree
It's
with you.
very
extremely
little freedom.
stressful.
In
also,
fact,
yeah,
we
to
could
teach.
stretch that to any workplace and say, let the workers run the place.
Well, we don't need management.
Yeah, we just do fine without our bosses most of the time
Yeah.
anyways.
We're happy when they don't come in. I mean, we really don't need them.
Would it perhaps be a solution to have a totally neutral, government-funded and organized AI that would substitute for the regular sort of boss or something? Would that be?
I say
even
just get a
possible?
robot.
I think
A robot.
Yeah,
Maybe a
you-
robot
have
should
a
do a lot of
you
robot
watch
things.
too
boss.
much Star Trek.
Robot manager.
Yeah.
Maybe one of these talking heads on a table that I see on
Well,
TV.
remember that there was a 1950s, that 1950s movie with the talking head. You know that she was like manipulated, and she it was all in her head. I can't remember.
It's like, oh yeah.
Because you don't need management.
Yeah, they
The
can
workers
be replaced
can-
by robots first. You know, they
Well-
should be the first.
Well, they
to
want
go.
More
us
and
to.
more,
They want
I
the
mean,
workers to be.
Well, we're all going to be
This
robots.
gets back to something I was mentioning earlier. More and more, it's found that management can be done away with because they have, basically, artificial intelligence has replaced many of these people and, automated their jobs to the point where lots of them became unemployed and descended, through the class structure unless their investments, were enough to keep them afloat.
Would that be more fair to everyone if you were evaluated by a machine instead of a person?
Whether
Is
it's
that gonna
fair
work
or
to our
not,
benefit
it
or
I
may
think
be on the near horizon, they say, according to the magazines, whether that's true or not, that we'll
Well-
have a workerless society because we will no longer have workers. That would be, what will that mean to the working class party?
Yeah.
If that deserves to
It'll
be
be called
thought of
the-
as an
the
issue at
leisure
all, I
class
don't know.
party.
But
We'll have
we
to
may
rename it.
have even more of a need for a working class party if we're actually
We'll-
faced with that
We'll have
situation.
legalized marijuana and it'll be completely leisurely and no working.
Well, it's actually true that Marx thought that the ultimate state of the worker society, getting to his dreams of what it might mean, is that machines would be developed that would totally automate society, and people would be dancers and artists, and they would be great cooks and chefs, and they would do whatever they wanted, and they wouldn't have to do stuff because stuff would be done and society would be automated. I think that's entirely possible, but where would the elite be if they couldn't manipulate people and somehow have more resources and power? Well, they wouldn't have more power than other people, so ultimately they wouldn't have more resources than other people. They would lose their status. And
They would own all the machines that run the place. Like
Yeah.
that's what's happening now with Google and Tesla and
That's the
Amazon.
problem when you're- yeah.
They're the ones owning everything.
Well, that's because we have not had a breakthrough of the working class party to make sure that the machines are going to be in the hands of the well-being of all of society, I suppose. You would want to, a week ago, you would want perhaps to talk about how you met the working class party.
Oh yeah.
And you were going to say something about the other, some other two candidates. So maybe. in the
Oh
last
yeah,
few
it's
minutes we should do that.
statewide. They're running for it's Marianne Henning and Logan R. Smith, and they're doing the public school board of education. And
Oh, we had those pictures up on the website. If if they're able to pull them up.
Oh yeah, we have some
If that's
stuff
possible.
on
Just a couple
the
photos.
website. We have some pictures of the candidates. Is
Oh,
that
and
what
we
you're
should mention the website. It's called workingclassfight.com.
workingclassfight.com. We could bring up those pictures. Otherwise, I suppose we could run this over to. There we go.
There.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice job.
And if you
There's
look
Lou.
on the
Lou's on the
right of the
Right.
screen and the upper row, Lou is second from the end of that row.
and the
there's
lady in the orange shirt.
Yeah, that's Mary Ann.
And what's
that's-
she running for?
She's the Board of Education,
In
and
De-
so is Logan.
in
the guy
Detroit, though.
In Detroit. But
Lou's the
that's
only local
Yeah,
candidate.
I'm the
yeah.
only local. But
Oh, so she's running for State Board of Education.
yeah, but those two are statewide. Logan and Mary Ann. They're running for statewide.
So how did you meet the party?
I met through Greg Shotwell. I was going to vacation in Yellowstone, and he called me up and said, "There's a couple of guys that want to come." This was like during the last.
Who's Greg?
president.
Greg's just a friend of yours?
Well, he's a
Yeah.
friend of mine.
Okay.
And he wanted me put up a couple of guys from Chicago who were campaigning for the Working Class Party when the last
I
election.
remember that they were gathering petitions to get
Yeah.
ballot access in Michigan.
Yeah, and so I had them stay over at my house, and that's how I got involved with the Working Class.
I was
Party.
surprised at how fast they got ballot access together.
Well, they work hard.
They do.
They really they gave me hope.
Mhm.
They really have, because I was kind of like, oh well, throw in the hat and say, well, you know.
You're ready
Gonna
to die,
re-
right?
ready to
Shuffle
die.
off into
Yeah,
that
yeah.
great silent distance.
Yeah, and they really have given me hope. I mean, that's why one of the reasons why I am running, because of them. They're a great bunch of people. They really are.
So, Lou has been not only he's not our guest because he's a member. So he's a member of this television group, the CTV Society, and Lou is running for state senate. And yeah, I think this is one of only maybe 3 times in many years that he's been on the show. I'm Mark Sapatowski. We also have Gerard Ackerheis. Lou Palus is our candidate and also fellow member of CTV.
I wonder if we've ever had a candidate on our show before.
Yes, we have, but not one who was one of us.
Uh-huh.
So we have had at least one candidate, a Democrat. We probably had more than one. Yeah. But one show that I did that had a Democrat.
We've
was
had the
one
Green
friend.
Party on the show.
That's
too.
true. Yeah. So. I'm
Well,
not
I
sure
like
was
the
on
Green
those
Party
shows.
too. They're a great bunch of people
They
as well.
kind of- They
Something-
could work together.
Yeah, it would be a marriage made in heaven. The Green Party and the Working Class Party.
Red
So,
and green, they're complementary
Lou
colors.
Palus, again, he is a local candidate here in Grand Rapids running the Working Class Party for state senator, 29th Michigan State Congressional District for the Lansing Legislature. And is our theme music with it? But yeah, it's been great, Lou. Good luck.
Thank you.
I'll vote for you.
Lou.
Build a party for the future.
Good show, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it was a
And-
pretty good show.
Final statements. We're in our last few seconds, Lou. You're going to
Well-
give us a final.
Well,
Campaign.
jobs, education, and better environment, that's our goal.
Jobs, education, a better environment,
And there's our director.
social justice,
And
end
social
to the new
justice.
Jim Crow,
And into the new Jim Crow laws.
restoring rights to
People of color.
victims
People
of
of
our
color.
society who've ended up in the criminal justice situation. And,
That's our goals. Come on board.
Vote for Lou.
any, yeah, Lou Palus. And there's Lou. He's still running, and we're still here. CTV comes to you to the 1st, the 5th, and the 1st, the 3rd, and
Third,
5th Wednesday of every month, live from 7 to 8 p.m. And as far as I know, we rerun 6 to 7 on Tuesdays, although I have to double check on that.
We're upside down. No.
And that is
No, we're
camera
upside
4.
Upside down world we're living, right?
It's so apropos.
The world turned upside down. Yeah, who would have thought we'd be living in this bizarre sci-fi world?